Fire is the rapid oxidation of a material in the exothermic chemical process of combustion, releasing heat, light, and various reaction products. Fire is hot because the converse of the weak double bond in molecular oxygen O2 to the stronger bonds in the combustion products carbon dioxide and water releases energy, 418 kilojoules per 32 grams of oxygen. Not O2, sorry. The bond energies of the fuel play only a minor role here. At a certain point in the combustion reaction, called the ignition point, flames are produced. The flame is the visible portion of the fire. Flames consist primarily of carbon dioxide, water vapor, oxygen, and nitrogen. If hot enough, the gases may become ionized to produce plasma, depending on the substances alight and any impurities outside. The color of the flame and the flame's intensity will be different. Fire, in its most common form, can result in conflagration, which has the potential to cause physical damage through burning. Fire is an important process that affects ecological systems around the globe. The positive effects of fire include stimulating growth and maintaining various ecological systems. Its negative effects include hazard to life and property, atmospheric pollution, and water contamination. If fire removes protective vegetation, heavy rainfall may lead to an increase in soil erosion by water. Also, when vegetation is burned, the nitrogen it contains is released into the atmosphere, unlike elements such as potassium and phosphorus, which remain in the ash and are quickly recycled into the soil. The loss of nitrogen caused by a fire produces a long-term reduction in the fertility of the soil, but this fecundity can potentially be recovered as molecular nitrogen in the atmosphere is fixed and converted to ammonia by natural phenomena such as lightning and leguminous plants that are nitrogen fixing, such as clover, peas, and green beans. Fire has been used by humans in rituals in agriculture, for clearing of land, for cooking, generating heat and light, for signaling, propulsion purposes, smelting, forging, incineration of waste, cremation, and as a weapon or mode of destruction. Contents: physical properties, chemistry, flames, typical adiabatic temperatures, fire ecology, fossil record, human control, use as fuel, protection and prevention, restoration. See also references, explanatory footnotes, citations, general bibliography, external links. Physical properties. When fire starts, when a flammable or combustive material, in combination with a sufficient quantity of an oxidizer such as oxygen gas or another oxygen-rich compound, though non-oxygen oxidizers exist, is exposed to a source of heat or ambient temperature above the flash point for the fuel/oxidizer mix, and is able to sustain a rate of rapid oxidization that produces a chain reaction. This is commonly called the fire tetrahedron. Fire cannot exist without all of these elements in place and in the right proportions. For example, a flammable liquid will start burning only if the fuel and oxygen are in the right proportions. Some fuel-oxygen mixes may require a catalyst, a substance that is not consumed when added in any chemical reaction during combustion, but which enables the reactants to combust more readily. Once ignited, a chain reaction must take place whereby fires can sustain their own heat by further release of heat energy in the process of combustion and may propagate provided there is a continuous supply of an oxidizer and fuel. If the oxidizer is oxygen from the surrounding air, the presence of a force of gravity or of some similar force caused by acceleration is necessary to produce convection, which removes the combustion product, and brings a supply of oxygen to the fire. Without gravity, a fire rapidly surrounds itself with its own combustion products and non-oxidizing gases from the air, which excludes oxygen and extinguishes the fire. Because of this, the risk of fire in a spacecraft is small when it is coasting in inertial flight. If this does not apply if oxygen is supplied to the fire by some process other than thermal convection. Fire can be extinguished by removing one of the elements of the fire tetrahedron. Consider a natural gas flame, such as from a stovetop burner. The fire can be extinguished by any of the following: turning off the gas supply, which removes the fuel source; covering the flame completely, which smothers the flame as the combustion both uses the available oxidizer, the oxygen in the air, and displaces it from the area around the flame with CO2. Application of water, which removes heat from the fire faster than the fire can produce it. Similarly, blowing hard on a flame will displace the heat of the currently burning gas from its fuel source to the same end. Or application of a retardant chemical such as halon to the flame, which retards the chemical reaction itself until the rate of combustion is too slow to maintain the chain reaction. In contrast, fire is intensified by increasing the overall rate of combustion. Methods to do this include balancing the input fuel and oxidizer to stoichiometric proportions. Increasing fuel and oxidizer input in this balanced mix, mixing the ambient temperature so the fire's own heat is better able to sustain combustion, or providing a catalyst, non-reactant medium in which the fuel and oxidizer can more readily react. Flamed. A flame is a mixture of reacting gases and solid emitting visible infrared and sometimes ultraviolet light, the frequency spectrum of which depends on the chemical composition of the burning material and intermediate reaction products. In many cases, such as the burning of organic matter, for example wood, or the incomplete combustion of gas in incandescent solid particles called soot or soot, produced the similar red-orange glow of fire. This light has a continuous spectrum. Complete combustion of gas has a dim blue color due to the emission of a single wavelength radiation of various electrons transition into the excited molecules formed in the flame. Usually oxygen is involved, but hydrogen burning in chlorine also produces a flame, producing hydrogen chloride, the HCl. In other possible combinations producing flames, amongst many are fluorine and hydrogen, and hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide. Hydrogen and hydrazine, UDMH. Flames are similarly pale blue, while burning boron and its compounds, evaluated in mid-20th century as a high-energy fuel for jet and rocket engines, emits intense green flame, leading to its informal nickname of Green Dragon. The glow of a flame is complex. Black body radiation is emitted from soot gas fuel particles through the soot particle, though the soot particles are too small to behave like perfect black bodies. There is also photon emission by de-excitation of atoms and molecules in the gas. Much of the radiation is emitted in the visible and infrared bands. The color depends on temperature from the black body radiation on the chemical makeup of the emission spectra. The dominant color of a flame changes with temperature. The photo of the forest fire in Canada is an excellent example of this variation. Near the ground where most burning is occurring, the fire is white, the hottest color possible for organic material in general, or yellow. Above the yellow region, the color changes to orange, which is cooler, then red, which is cooler still. However, the red region combustion no longer occurs, and the combustion carbon particles are visible as black smoke. The common distribution of flame under normal gravity conditions depend on convection, as soot tends to rise to the top of general flame, as in a candle in normal gravity conditions, making it yellow. In microgravity or zero gravity, such as an environment in outer space, convection no longer occurs and the flame becomes spherical, with a tendency to become more blue and more efficient, although it may go out if not moved steadily, as the CO2 from combustion does not disperse as readily in microgravity and tends to smother the flame. There are several possible explanations for this difference, of which the most likely is that the temperature is sufficiently evenly distributed that soot is not formed and complete discombustion occurs. Experiments by NASA revealed that diffusion flames in microgravity allow more soot to be completely oxidized after they are produced than diffusion flames are, because of a series of mechanisms that behave differently in microgravity when compared to normal gravity conditions. These discoveries have potential applications in applied science and industry, especially concerning fuel efficiency. In combustion engines, various steps are taken to eliminate a flame. The method depends mainly on whether the fuel is oil, wood, or a high-energy fuel such as jet fuel. Typical adiabatic temperatures. The adiabatic flame temperature of a given fuel and oxidizer pair is that at which the gases achieve stable combustion. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. Oxyacetylene, oxyhydrogen, actylene, sure, blowtorch, Bunsen burner, candle, fire ecology. Every natural ecosystem has its own fire regime, and the organisms in those ecosystems are adapted to or dependent upon that fire regime, or regime even. Fire creates a mosaic of different habitat patches, each at a different stage of succession. Different species of plants, animals, and microbes specializing in exploiting a particular stage, and by creating these different types of patches, fire allows a greater number of species to exist within a landscape. The fossil record of fire appears with the establishment of a land-based flora in the middle Ordovician period, 470 million years ago, permitting the accumulation of oxygen in the atmosphere as never before, as new hordes of land plant pumped out as a waste product. When this concentration rose above 13%, it permitted the possibility of wildfire. Wildfire is first recorded in the late Silurian fossil record, 420 million years ago. The fossils of charcoalified plants. Apart from a controversial gap between late Devonian charcoal is present ever since. The level of atmospheric oxygen is closely related to the prevalence of charcoal. Clearly, oxygen is the key factor in the abundance of wildfire. Fire also became more abundant when grasses radiated and became the dominant component of many ecosystems around 6 to 7 million years ago. This kindling provided tinder, which allowed for the more rapid spread of fire, not a dating service. The widespread fire may have initiated a possible feedback process whereby they produced a warmer, drier climate to conductive fire. Conductive to fire, sorry. Human control. The ability to control fire was a dramatic change in the habitats of early humans, making fire to generate heat and light, make it more possible for people to cook food, simultaneously increasing the variety and availability of nutrients and reducing disease by killing organism in the food. The heat produced would also help people stay warm in cold weather, enabling them to live in cooler climates. Fire has also kept nocturnal predators at bay. Evidence of cooked food is found from 1 million years ago, although fire was probably not used in a controlled fashion until 400,000 years ago. There is some evidence that fire may have been used in a controlled fashion about 1 million years ago. Evidence became widespread around 5 to 100,000 years ago, suggesting future use from this time, a regular use from this time. Interestingly, resistance to air pollution started to evolve in human populations at a similar point in time. The use of fire became progressively and more sophisticated, with it being used to create charcoal and control wildfire from tens of thousands of years ago. Fire has been used for centuries as a method of torture and execution, as evidenced by death by burning, as well as torture devices such as the iron boot, which could be filled with water, oil, or even lead, then heated over to an open fire to the agony of the wearer. By Neolithic revolution, during the introduction of grain-based agriculture, people all over the world used fire as a tool in landscape management. These fires were typically controlled burns or cool fires, as opposed to uncontrolled hot fires which damage the soil. Hot fires destroy plants and animals and endanger communities. This is especially a problem in the forest of today, where traditional burning is prevented in order to encourage the growth of timber crops. Cool fires are generally conducted in the spring and autumn. They clear undergrowth, burning up biomass that could trigger a hot fire should it get too dense. They provide a greater variety of environments, which encourages game and plant diversity. For humans, they make dense, impassable forests traversable. Another human use for fire in regards to landscape management is its use to clear land for agriculture. Slash and burn agriculture is still common across much of tropical Africa, Asia, and South America. For small farmers, it is a convenient way to clear undergrown areas and release nutrients from standing vegetation back into the soil, said Miguel Pindo Vasquez, an ecologist at the Earth's Institute Center for Environmental Research and Conservation. However, this useful strategy is also problematic. Growing population, fragmenting of the forests, and warming climate are making the Earth's surface more prone to ever larger escaped fires. These harmful ecosystems and human infrastructure cause health problems and send up spirals of carbon and soot that may encourage even more warming of the atmosphere, and thus feed back into more fires. Globally today, as much as 5 million square kilometers, an area more than half the size of the United States, burns in a given year. There are numerous modern applications of fire. In its broadest sense, fire is used by nearly every human being on Earth in a controlled setting every day. The users of internal combustion vehicles employ fire every time they drive. Thermal power stations provide electricity for a large percentage of humanity. The use of fire in warfare has a long history. Fire was the basis of all early thermal weapons. Homer detailed the use of fire by Greek soldiers who hid in a wooden horse to burn Troy during the Trojan War. Later, the Byzantine fleet used Greek fire to attack ships and men. In the First World War, the first modern flamethrowers were used by infantry and were successfully mounted on armored vehicles in the Second World War. In the latter war, incendiary bombs were used by Axis and Allies alike, notably on Tokyo, Rotterdam, London, Hamburg, and notoriously at Dresden. In the latter two cases, firestorms were deliberately caused, in which a ring of fire surrounded each city, was drawn inward by an updraft, causing the central cluster of fires. The United States Army Air Force was also extensively used incendiaries against Japanese targets in the latter months of war, devastating entire cities constructed primarily of wood and paper houses. The use of napalm was employed in July 1944 towards the end of the Second World War, although it did not gain public attention until the Vietnam War. Molotov cocktails were also used. Use as fuel. Setting fuel aflame releases unusable energy. Wood is a prehistoric fuel and is still viable today. The use of fossil fuels such as petroleum, natural gas, and coal in power plants supplies the vast majority of the world's electricity today. The International Energy Agency states that nearly 80% of the world's power came from these sources in 2002. The fire in a power station is used to heat water, creating steam, and it drives turbines. The turbines then spin an electrical generator to provide electricity. Fire is also used to provide mechanical work directly in both external and internal combustion engines. The unburnable solid remains of a combustible material left after a fire is called clinker, if its melting point is below the flame's temperature, so that it fuses and then solidifies as it cools, and ash if its melting point is above the flame temperature. Protection and prevention. Wildfire prevention programs around the world may employ techniques such as wildfire land use and prescribed or controlled burns. Wildfire land use refers to any fire or natural cause that is monitored but allowed to burn. Controlled fires are fires ignited by government agencies under less dangerous weather conditions. Firefighting services provided in most developed areas to extinguish or contain uncontrolled fires. Trained firefighters use fire apparatus, water supply resources such as water mains and fire hydrants, or they might use A and B class foam depending on what is feeding the fire. Fire prevention is intended to reduce sources of ignition. Fire prevention also uses education to teach people how to avoid causing fires. Buildings, especially schools and tall buildings, often conduct fire drills to inform and prepare citizens on how to react to a building fire. Purposely starting destructive fires constitutes arson and is a crime in most jurisdictions. Model building codes requires passive fire protection and active fire protection systems to minimize damage resulting from a fire. The most common form of active fire protection is fire sprinklers to maximize passive fire protection of buildings. Building materials and furnishings in most developed countries are tested for fire resistance, combustibility, and flammability. Upholstery, carpenting, and plastics used in vehicles and vessels are also tested. Where the fire prevention and fire protection have failed to prevent damage, fire insurance can mitigate the financial impact. Restoration. Different restoration methods and measures are used depending on the type of fire damage that occurred. Restoration after fire damage can be performed by property management teams, building maintenance personnel, or by the house owners themselves. However, contacting a certified professional fire damage restoration specialist is often regarded as the safest way to restore fire damaged property due to their training and extensive experience. Most are usually listed under fire and water restoration, and they can help speed repairs, whether for individual homeowners or the largest of institutions. Fire and water restoration companies are regulated by the appropriate state's Department of Consumer Affairs, usually the State Contractors License Board. In California, all fire and water restoration companies must register with the California Contractors State License Board. Presently, the California Contractors State License Board has no specific classification for fire and water and fire damage restoration. Hence, the Contractors State License Board requires both an asbestos certification, ASB, as well as a demolition classification, C21, in order to perform fire and water restoration work. And that was the first episode of me reading random Wikipedia articles. I hope you enjoyed this 26 minutes of me reading the fire Wikipedia article.